Hello and welcome to Express Sports Podcast. You're listening to Game Time with me, Mihir Vasavda, and happy to report that, to borrow what Amit said in our failed recording the first time over, the band is back. After a very long time, there's a full quorum in the house. Ab tak Amit travel kar raha tha. He was in Norway covering chess. I can't recommend enough him all his chess stories. You'll be able to read them on indianexpress.com. He's back after his wonderful trip, and so is Vinayakk. Well, he wasn't anywhere. Like Amit और मैं ही थोड़ा सा गायब थे, but Vinayakk was the one holding fort, keeping us updated with everything that was going on in the sporting world. And good to have the full quorum. Although Amit, Vinayakk, I don't think we'll be kind of focusing on sport as such. Of course, we'll be talking about sport, but not the Yorkers and the square drives or whatever the shots that are in trend in T20 World Cup these days. But Amit, अच्छा यार, काफी टाइम बाद सब वापस आ गए.
Yeah, absolutely, Mir. Now that you've already stolen the band is back together line, now I'm left scrambling for something else to say.
That was my opening move.
हाँ, already checkmate कर दिया, but ठीक है. Well, as the Norwegians like to say, Norway is the land जहाँ पे सबको अपना personal space बहुत पसंद है, but जब thank you बोलते हैं तो मतलब they say tusen tak rather than thank you, which is 1,000 thank yous. So 1,000 thank yous to you, Vinayakk, for holding fort while we were away, making this podcast your own. And what has your experience been like on the podcast?
I don't know if I've been holding down the fort. I've just been filling in for either of you the days you were not there, but...
Before Vinayakk starts to speak, I think we need to tell our listeners that before we started recording, Vinayakk was complaining that he can't find a quiet corner in his house where he gets internet properly. Before that, I was having troubles with my own recording. So, yeah, it's nice to have the band back, but like a socially distant band.
Without the instruments. Just a few hours ago, Vinayakk had kind of been talking about how ICC has completely messed up the World Cup and can't kind of stress that enough. There's so many things wrong with the ongoing T20 World Cup कि यार मतलब कब matches start हो रही है, कब खत्म हो रही है, कौन से दिन खेल रहा है, कुछ पता ही नहीं चल रहा है. And I mean, very frankly, we've seen so many sports conduct their marquee events, and you think of the Cricket World Cup and it just, I don't know, I may be biased guys, but मतलब ऐसा वो लोग खुद के कंपटीशन को इतना डाउनग्रेड करने की कोशिश क्यों करते हैं? I never kind of get that. Vinayakk, you feel very strongly about, how ICC has gone about organizing this World Cup. And I think we should kind of maintain a chronology here because it's very easy to go like in all directions. So first up, it's a World Cup, but everything's designed to favor one country, and we shouldn't be wasting time in guessing which country we are talking about क्योंकि यार हम खुद की कितनी बुराई कर रहे हैं अब.
No, so actually, slight modification to how you entered into that conversation. I don't think, it's probably one of the better World Cups, so to speak, that the ICC have done. I think we need to acknowledge that.
Not the sporting side, the organizational side.
No, even on the organizational side, the fact that we have 20 teams and there is a proper pre-group to the tournament and not just like how the last edition, if you remember, the first phase was just all these associate nations playing among themselves. We were talking about this, I think, Amit, in the last podcast, right? Kind of, or actually in the office with our editor, Sandeep Dwivedi sir, where, there is a scene in Dark Knight, I don't know if you guys remember, where the Joker throws a stick to a room full of thugs and says, whoever emerges out of this with the alive at the end comes and joins me, right? That's sort of a format where the smaller teams all fought among themselves for a chance to play with the bigger teams. That was the first stage of the tournament last time around in Australia. It's like, you earn the right to play the bigger teams, so to speak. And the first few matches were all just for that, right? At least this time that wasn't there, the teams are all involved, 20 teams, the biggest World Cup, they are all part of the pre-group, the first stage of the tournament, and that is a good thing. And the World Cup felt finally like a World Cup where, there are many teams participating and not just for the sake of it. So that part they did right? So we shouldn't take that away from them. But yeah, there's been a lot of messy things after that, and the whole format and, the way they've gone about certain things have not been great.
Yeah, I think just to start off this whole, as you said, chronology, just look at it this way, that 20 teams started the tournament. Out of that, 8 are going to play in the Super 8 stage. Now, the weird part is that these guys have figured out some sort of a contrived way of a seeding system where a team like India or a team like Australia, they could have finished second or first in their group and still ended up in Group A for the Super 8. So, which means at some point, when they had secured their qualification, they had no motivation kind of to play for anything else at all, because you don't carry forward the points, you definitely don't carry forward the run rate. So, I mean, that kind of took the wind out of the ending kind games, right? Everything was either a damn squib or a dead rubber in a sense.
I mean, yeah, essentially that's like, again, I mean, that's the first problem, right? I mean, Vinayakk, we mentioned about how kind of the World Cup is staged in the sense of how the draws are made and everything. And I think ICC is kind of stuck with the same script for many years, that there is a compulsion to have an India-Pakistan match at every World Cup, and it can't be a coincidence that, I don't know, when was the last World Cup where a group stage match didn't have India-Pakistan, when quote-unquote there is supposed to be a luck of draws when the draw is supposed to be held. And then, like, you add another dimension where the seedings are prefixed, so it takes away a lot of charm from the group stage. And even in the group stage, you tweeted it out the other day as well, the last matches of the group stages not starting simultaneously. It takes away some of the thrills which we see in football and hockey, the simultaneous matches going on, the permutations and combinations and all those things. It isn't happening. And we're just starting the list of problems over here, I guess.
Yeah, perfect. And one of the most, I mean, I have to weigh my words here carefully. One of the most bizarre things about the tournament is the pre-seeding that Amit mentioned, where, Group 1 in the Super 8 is A1, B2, C1, D2, and all those 4 seedings were not based on where you finish in the group. I mean, India are A1 irrespective of whether they were first or second in the group. Australia were B2 irrespective of whether they were first or second in the group. And we have the Euros happening simultaneously, right? It's a nice sort of contrast that is going on simultaneously where, in Euro, you already know that how the groups pan out is going to have a huge impact on the rest of the tournament. Whether a team finishes first in the group, second in the group, or third in the group has a major impact on what is going to happen later. And that is what you want in these major tournaments, right? I mean, that every match is important in the sense that if England finish second, who are they going to face in the round of 16s or quarterfinals? What is the side of the draw they're going to end up in? Are we getting a marquee clash very early than it needs to be because a team slipped up in the group stage? None of that is possible in the Cricket World Cup. I mean, it's absolutely bizarre. Like Josh Hazelwood, I think we have to go back to that press conference, the superb press conference that has kind of provided the most masala off the field for the group stage of the World Cup, where he said, against Scotland, I mean, if there is a chance where we could make sure that England go out of the group stage, we'll do that. He basically spoke about, Australia might go slow and bring the net run rate up for Scotland so that it might, eventually the net run rate didn't play a part in that group because of how big England's wins were. But the fact that he could say that was because Australia versus Scotland had absolutely no meaning the moment Australia won their 3 matches. I mean, Australia had nothing to play for. If there was a chance that, Australia had to make sure that they had to, be at a certain run rate where, England couldn't overtake them, something of the sort. There is some sort of a carryover. But they basically made a dead rubber for Australia-Scotland just because Australia were going to be B2 and facing India in that group anyway, right? There was no incentive for Australia to, top the group, ensure that there is no question mark around who is topping the group. I mean, that would have been the case when they won 3 matches anyway, but still, the fact that even India-Pakistan, the match that everyone seems to be talking about, if Pakistan had managed to beat USA in that crazy game, India-Pakistan, the match result had no bearing whatsoever on the rest of the tournament. It's all just for show.
I remember when you had done this explainer, Vinayakk, before the T20 World Cup, right? I remember because on the production end of our job, you had sent like a small tiny pointer and you mentioned about A1, B2 and whatever other acronyms that we can think about over there. And initially I thought, ये चलो थोड़ा सा stargazing हो रहा है and it might not be exactly what Vinayakk is saying. And I thought, चलो, it's not an important point, we can edit it out. And then you kind of explained to me what the situation was. And I found it extremely bizarre. And essentially, you spoke about Josh Hazelwood in Australia. And if I understand this properly, I don't think it was even designed perhaps to assist or aid Australia in a way. I think it was all designed in a way so that these guys can have an assured India-Pakistan match again sometime later in the competition, is what I kind of conclude from all this, because that's where the money is.
Yeah, I mean, if the USA upset hadn't happened, Pakistan would have been in the other group. So they were probably hoping for an India-Pakistan semi-final or India-Pakistan final, which is not happening anyway because thanks to Pakistan doing Pakistan things, as Amit had said beautifully in the last podcast. So yeah, and basically the tournament scheduled, and if I have to guess, I mean, and it's not basically a tough guess, the pre-seeding is basically because they wanted India to know where their fixtures are going to be, because they were going to be A1 irrespective of where they finish in the group, and they would know that, okay, so A1's matches are here. It doesn't matter whether they won against Pakistan or not, India are going to play their Super 8 matches here, right? So, I mean, it probably works for all teams in that sense, but that's not how sport is supposed to be. That's not how a World Cup is supposed to be. You're supposed to earn a seeding. The group stages are supposed to matter. Like, when the Super 8 begins, we are just starting off a fresh tournament. That is what is, like, when you think about it, it boggles my mind. I mean, it's just 8 teams playing a World Cup starting from Wednesday. Whatever happens till Tuesday it helped pick you that 8 teams, but it actually has no bearing what we have done so far in the World Cup going forward. When you think about it, it's crazy.
Amit, we've seen other sports and the way they carry out their World Cups, right? And we'll not make it like a cricket only thing, because I'm sure there are hockey, for example, does scheduling which is kind of favorable to India. I think TV times in football are dictated by what European countries want, and we saw at Tokyo Olympics last time where all the swimming finals were held in the daytime in Tokyo, just so that, the primetime audience in the US would be able to watch it. But it always kind of gives me a feeling, Amit, कि cricket goes थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा. Anyway, आपके गिन चुन के 4-5 countries है जो competitive है. Australia is the most competitive. They're the 50 over world champions, former T20 champions. And then when you look at the scheduling and the fact that all the matches, most of the matches, if not all, are starting well past midnight in Australia, means that A, you're not concerned about that cricketing market, and certainly you're not concerned about the local market wherever the matches are held in New York, Florida, Dallas, or in Barbados or Trinidad or jo bhi jagah ho. Because in US or West Indies, it's 9:30 or 10 in the morning where the matches are beginning, and in Australia it's well past midnight. So you're essentially having matches just for Indian subcontinent, which I don't know how to even kind of make that logic sound logical.
Yeah, but Mihir, there is also this one fascinating thing that I heard in some other conversation, right? That the point of the whole thing is, like, see, you wouldn't have maybe all of this. I think the ICC's explanation for doing this seeding format is so that, let's say, Indian fans want to travel, so they can book their tickets in advance to know where India is going to play their Super 8 games. That was the logic, essentially. Flawed, obviously, but then, theek hai, chalo, let's concede that. But now, the fact of the matter is that you are going to have to jump through all of these hoops only because you've decided to award the World Cup to not just the West Indies, which is essentially a collection of islands, but also the USA, where, you are basically dividing it into plenty of islands jahan pe maybe teams have to take a lot of flights. Now, the explanation that they are trying to very subtly pass off for having USA in the first place, a country where there is not much elite history of cricket, is the fact that agar USA market mein ye chal gaya sport, then maybe ICC then stops relying so heavily on India, because you already have a diaspora, India, Pakistan, Nepal, all of that in USA. If you can tap into that market, then maybe you can weave yourself of the reliance that you have on the Indian market. But the problem with that is, as you mentioned, because they are also targeting the Indian audiences, you are keeping matches at times when the local diaspora fans can't actually make it to the stadiums. Ya fir humne dekha ki there was one, I think, before the World Cup started, there was a match happening, I believe, in Texas or someplace, jahan pe I think a couple of journalists had turned up or fans had turned up, and they were basically said, sorry, we are not selling tickets for this event, so you can't even pay us to watch this game, even if you've traveled so many hours to be here. So it's been a bit of a bizarre, like their explanations for one side basically counter the things that they're trying to do on the other.
And Vinayakk, they're also kind of ek tarah se questioning the loyalty of an Indian cricket fan in this, right? I understand it's the suits at the broadcasters or the Cricket Association, the ICC, who are making a lot of these decisions, and they generally look at things from a business point of view rather than a sporting fan point of view. But there was a time when a lot of us used to be up till 3 or 4 in the morning watching matches in the West Indies, and there used to be a big thrill to it too. I mean, we still kind of spend our entire nights watching Champions League matches or watching the Euros matches right now. Of course, the numbers won't be the same, but I'm sure if there is a Cricket World Cup match between India and Pakistan played at the prime time in West Indies, maybe midnight in India, there'll still be quite a few people watching it. And there used to be this whole thrill too, right? You had to kind of, as kids, you had to cheat, you had to kind of ensure that if your mom, dad are asleep, you sneak into the TV room, switch on the TV, keep it on mute and watch the match. I think this generation won't know that experience.
Mir, 1 second. Before Vinayak answers, I think for people who are, you have those issues कि अरे अगर awkward time पे है तो TV पे नहीं देख पाएंगे, mom, dad सो रहे हैं या whatever it is, you can always follow the match live. हम live blog चलाते हैं और उस पे देख लो. Follow the match on indianexpress.com.
क्या plug है अमित? Well plugged, Amit.
When you've woken up at 4 a.m. to run cricket live blogs, I think इतना तो बनता है.
Bilkul. No, but actually that is a good point. No, I mean, the thrill that you spoke about following late night matches in West Indies, I'd actually refer to the thrill of waking up early to watch Australia matches. Like, I am not an early morning person. I can't wake up at 6 every day. I mean, I don't. But for India, Australia, when India go to Australia, just the sheer thrill of the start of the Australian summer, waking up at 6 a.m. for a Boxing Day test, you do it 5 days in a row. How many thousands do it, right? And they do it because they love the sport and it had its own charm. And a primetime US or a West Indies match would be around, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. or the 5 a.m., 6 a.m. matches that we've been seeing in the West Indies. Why do you assume that India can't play a 5 a.m., 6 a.m. match? At least, have sort of flexibility around it. Every India match was predetermined to be at 8. Even the group, that's what, as I was saying, the A1 slots were all taken by primetime India's 8 p.m. start. And there is no variety to India matches, right? And all the other team are playing both, morning match or an evening match. And India semi-final is already pre-decided. The only team that knows which semi-final they are going to play is India. Right? That's just, it's so bizarre when you think about it. Yeah, it doesn't matter which semi-final India play. It doesn't matter if India finish second in their group or first in their group. They know that they are going to play the semi-final that starts at 8 p.m. in Indian time.
Vinayak, sorry, but this also happened at one of the previous World Cups, right? When India and Pakistan ka group stage game was the only one with a reserve day.
That I don't remember. Actually, this time around, India semi-final is the one without a reserve day. So that's a little bit odd because only the first semi-final has a reserve day and India can't play the first semi-final because it's an early morning start in Indian time. So they gave India the second semi-final, which means it is one day before the final and there is no possibility of reserve day. So it'll be really funny if India is knocked out because of rain in the second semi-final.
It's one of the reasons why I actually hate it when all the sporting decisions, and this is not related to cricket alone, it's at the Olympics and football, when the sports marketing executives, right, they start having a bigger say in how the sport is run than the people who have been in sports administration, because they just kind of take all the romance out of it and kind of just think it from a monetary point of view. For them, the spectators are just a one TRP number. So that's kind of extremely sad. And that's what kind of cricket is kind of drifting towards, right? It's become a sport where I think everything they want is कि Indian market को आप milk कर लीजिए जब तक ये पैसे देती है, and then we'll think about the sport later on, which is very disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you referring to the Indian market as a cow, me?
Oh, wow. The part of the country where I'm sitting and recording this right now, I'll just take a fifth, as they say. Fifth, right? Or the first. Whatever. But no, okay. I think regardless, as Vinayak said at the start of the episode, the group stage of this World Cup was fun. So I think we can conclude this episode with at least on a positive note, given the fact that there were so many heartwarming stories, and we know that cricket, when it comes to the Olympics in 2028, it won't be a competition between 3 or 4 nations, because clearly the sides like USA, Nepal, Netherlands, they'll all be well prepared. Vinayakk, Amit, closing thoughts?
Mir, I know you asked for something positive, but I'd just leave you with one thought. I was just planning our schedule for the next few days, and I've noticed that Australia are playing 2 consecutive days pay games, which is on the 23rd and 24th. Bangladesh are playing 2 consecutive games on the 21st and 22nd. England are playing again on 20th and 21st. USA are playing on 22nd and 23rd. So all of these guys are anyway, I mean, I understand that, because USA is 12 hours behind, they will probably still have technically on 2 separate days, but Indian time ke hisab se they are playing consecutive days pe hi, which is a luxury that India has कि वो लोग 20, 22nd and 24th को खेल रहा सारे games. So I don't know, मतलब in terms of positivity, maybe Vinayakk is a more...
I mean, India is again the only one of the very few countries. I think 1 or 2 countries haven't traveled between USA and West Indies, and one of them is India. So yeah, I mean, if we go back to that hole again, there is no coming back.
Mir, I think because Schadenfreude is such a good, I don't know, there is an Indian term for it, Germany hai, but then Hindustaniyon ko bahut acha lagta hai especially when they talk about our neighbors. So I think if I had to give a positive, funny, hilarious, whatever parting thought, it would be this, that the Pakistan cricket team picked a bunch of guys in their team because they play in the Caribbean Premier League, thinking that those guys will give them an advantage. And Pakistan never made it to the Super 8 stage, so they played all their matches in the USA anyway. So they never made it to the Caribbean.
And they're preparing for the Los Angeles Olympics, yeah.
Again, Caribbean Premier League.
Yeah. I mean, the positives I exhausted in the early part of the segment. But yeah, so the thing that we say in Indian sport a lot, someone succeeds because of this, despite the system and not because of it. I think that's kind of is what, all these feel-good stories about USA and nearly Scotland coming through, and, it's basically despite what the World Cup wanted to happen and not because of, a fair and free and integrity-filled system. So the feel-good stories are nice, but yeah, it's not exactly. Another, like what Amit mentioned, another little stat nugget. I was wondering before the India-USA game, has there ever been this is just a thought out there, has there ever been a World Cup match between the host and the away side where the home side is playing at that particular venue for the first ever time and the away side has played 3-4 matches? I mean, can you think of that sort of situation? India has played a warm-up match in Nassau. They played their first 2 matches in Nassau. They already knew everything about Nassau. USA were playing at that venue for the first ever time. They're the host of the tournament. I was trying to rack my brain and is it even possible in any other sport? Like a freshly built stadium, I would assume that the home team would have played a match or 2 more than the away team. But yeah, that's I think that kind of sums up what we know about the World Cup.
Mir, if you want, I can maybe find a slightly funnier nugget than I gave previously. I mean, this has nothing to do with the Cricket World Cup, but I want to take your attention to the 2016 Kabaddi World Cup, when there was an American Kabaddi team which came to India to participate. They ended up playing against India in the first game, and it was one of the most comical things you will ever see, because, I mean, आपने अगर वो वाला match देखा होगा तो you would have noticed that there were some times that the Indian raider just had to enter their quarter and these guys would just fall out of bounds, thereby giving away points and whatever, without any pressure. But that only came about because a lot of those players that were representing USA were basically some random rappers that somebody had texted and said ki "Arey tum kya kar rahe ho? If you are free, aa jao, kabaddi khelenge, we'll represent USA." So if you are looking for a positive takeaway from this World Cup, it is that at least the Team USA cricket outfit is a slightly better, or actually much more better, well-drilled, well-oiled team than the Kabaddi team that we saw 8 years ago coming to India.
Yeah, well, that's actually nicely summed up, because for them it was an American dream that's come true. Cricket, well, I think it's an American nightmare in a way, for the way they kind of go about organizing these things, logistically at least. We can go on and on, but that's, I guess, how much time we have for today's episode. Shashank, our producer, has already kind of snuck into our DMs and warned us कि अभी ये recording में ज़्यादा time बचा नहीं है. So we'll wrap up. We'll be, of course, following the business end of the World Cup. For how much ever gali we have given, we'll still be back, hoping that India's semi-final ka reserve day factor doesn't come into play, and hoping that India will be in the final next Sunday, so that we get one more episode to talk about the wonderful thing that's the World Cup. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.
You were listening to Express Sports by the Indian Express. This week's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.